Okay. Hello, this is episode 45 of the Following Mechanical Turks project, where we are engaging with Amazon's Mechanical Turks crowdsourcing service through a variety of academic means. We're producing some different scholarly works that use different methods to examine this platform, which is a interesting synthesis of human and non-human actants, and deals with all kinds of interesting ethical concerns and labor issues and those sorts of things, which are definitely relevant right now for other reasons. I mean, related, but not precisely the reasons that are immediately manifesting on this platform. So that's the gist of what we're doing today. We are taking a look first at some data collection results we're getting for the second scholarly product, which for which we are posting some hits on mTurk, interrogating issues of readability, right? So readability emerged as a relevant concept in the first product because it's interestingly complex. Not only does it speak to something that is a quality of different media items, right? Like a readable text, but it also speaks to things like a readable situation, which speaks to some sort of human notion of perception. But then it also, at a different echelon, speaks to human beings as themselves being readable, as themselves essentially having a symbolic function, right? So our behaviors can be readable, particularly by computers. And so all of these different interpretations of readable are relevant on this platform. We're interrogating them as much as we can within the purview of the work by posting some hits and therefore looking at the readability of our instructional content, the readability of media we've produced, and then also the readability of the Turkers, including ourselves as requesters, and their behavior patterns. So we started to get some of those results back, from the posts we've made, and so far, we're going to have a sort of range of results based on shifts in instructional language, based on compensation level as well. But even in this early stage, we're starting to see some pretty, I think, interesting results in that we're seeing kind of a scatter in terms of things that I suspect people would deem as accurate summaries of content, which will be phase 2 of data collection, is essentially establishing what ones are readable without presupposing a definition of what that means. Mm-hmm. So an emergent definition will potentially coalesce based on people's judgments. But so we're seeing things that I anticipate, although I'm not going to put my thumb on the scale, but that people would see as readable, and others that sort of run the gamut of less readable or less accurate, to things that are seemingly just either sort of scam replies or bot replies, because they don't pertain to the questions at all, which in some situations people would say, well, that's invalid data, just cut it out. For our purposes, that's exactly what we wanted, was to see this range, right? In fact, sort of, because you have to approve these hits, and you'll take a look at one and it'll be like, well, if a human actually did this, they paid absolutely no attention to, they're just literally hitting buttons if it wasn't an automated script doing this.
Right.
But, as per our method, I did not hesitate to approve those. I had a chuckle and then hit yes, so.
We should build that into our build in that chuckle into our methods discussion for the second product.
Yeah, we'll see how detailed we have to get. I mean, the one thing, as per our IRB approval, that I am looking for is anything that could be construed as obscene or threatening. Not from out of any personal sensitivity, but that would be a violation of mTurk's guidelines, actually. That, as we've noticed through our first product, you do have to signal adult situations. Yeah. And then there are, even beyond that, there are just some things that are not allowable on the platform, understandably, right? You can't, make personal threats to somebody or something, or, imagine a hyperbolic case like, soliciting an assassination on a crowdsourced platform or something like that. There's a movie waiting to be written, right?
Well, I wonder too if there's again, going back to that sort of that ethnographic piece that we read, that there's a sense in which the Turkers don't want those kinds of responses either, because
right.
It will dilute the, no one will post hits if half of the, answers are menacing or threatening, and because they're being rewarded elsewhere in the system.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as we saw in sort of some of the material we were looking at for this piece, let me see, where is it here? Just one moment, so we can make this practical. One example was this piece that we've discussed in a previous episode, the Being a Turker piece. Martin et al. Appears to be the lead author. That piece, well, and I can actually, sitting in front of a computer. That piece had some interesting things to say about sort of the internal maintenance and cultivation that Turkers do on the platform. I mean, as you mentioned, through sort of norms and just, market forces as well. There are reasons why certain hits and certain requesters, are accepted, whereas other behaviors, other requests, and those kinds of things are not. Don't survive or don't get responses, right? In an interesting way, often they persist, as we saw in our first product. A lot of, posts that are in different ways antithetical to the system. They're a waste of time. They don't compensate fairly.
Right.
They're poorly written. Those persist, which curiously is a kind of failure, right? Because their job is to get completed, not to linger. So there was some interesting sort of prep work that we've read about.
Yeah. In
terms of the, the maintenance that Turkers do. And then also, as you alluded to, and I saw this, I've seen this before, this short story. Have you seen this short story, this sci-fi one, where we receive a response to our many messages being blasted across the solar system and now the galaxy, and the response is, "Be quiet, they'll hear you."
Yeah.
There's also a sort of distinct, and this is relevant, I think, to kind of this question right now that's going on sort of with Amazon in a broader sense of labor issues, right? Right now, we're in the midst of a salient labor organization vote, right? That's happening right now, dealing with, as we touch upon in the first product, particularly things like their fulfillment center workers, right? When we think Amazon, that's what we tend to think of as material goods and logistics. And so those workers, people who work in the fulfillment centers and also drivers, we've seen a lot of kind of, you get, notable headlines like how they have to pee in their trucks because they simply can't, stop. And so right now there's labor organizing votes going on. And, just this morning, I was seeing some of the headlines saying it looks like that vote is going to fail. Right now, the early returns are such that it would be shocking. We're all learning more about votes. And this was a big mail vote also, which is also, interesting because, again, some of those same issues are at stake. But the early returns are such that it looks like at the, I believe it's the Alabama center where they're running this vote, a center in that state. I should know, but I don't. It looks like that's going to fail. And on MTurk there, and this is addressed in Being a Turker, but we've also seen in other places, these sort of questions of like organization and unionization are really sort of anathema to that platform, where the sort of the typical response among Turker networks, right? Affinity networks, because they do have sort of third-party platforms where they discuss these things. Are, any push towards something like unionization will just will precipitate Amazon to just turn off the tap, be like, fine, this isn't worth dealing with. And, seemingly they could just do that in a way that, they can't stop people from having unionization conversations, right? I mean, that's illegal, despite, there's a line there to be ridden. But, in this situation, it seems like the feeling is, well, they'll just stop doing it. They'll just flip the switch and this will all go away. So there is often this kind of, as we talked about previously, the sort of notion of preserving the platform despite its potential inequities and sort of violations.
Almost getting to the point where it actually, because of its very precarity, that is the best argument for it.
Yeah.
The Turkers are really worried about not just Amazon shutting it down, but people not posting hits anymore. It'll drive away requesters.
Yeah, right. And we see those kinds of conversations, in other forms of organization, that it's like, well, if we have to deal with this, then we're just going to move out of state, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of like Bullard's dumping in Dixie, where, he makes a pretty clear equation between, and a sort of invoked dichotomy between economic growth and protections, where it's like that's an imposed dichotomy that's being leveraged, right? To say, well, if you're going to make us, if you're going to regulate us, then we're getting out of here, right? It's like, it's a threat. Everyone's got a gun to each other's head.
Yeah. But what's interesting on MTurk is how internalized it is.
Yeah.
Like, just built in. I mean, our sort of systems focused interest, that it seems just to be built into it. It's a built-in resistance to any kind of protection.
Yeah. As we talked about, to the degree, and, I'm not delegitimizing this, of seeing those kinds of moves and also the kind of scholarship, potentially even the work we're doing, as patronizing in certain ways, where it's like, we don't want your external protection. We don't want someone coming in and saying, oh, poor you're being exploited, let me fix this for you. It's like, that came up in a lot of scholarship we read about this, where it's like a lot of times the attitude is, we don't want you here doing that, right? This is our space for commerce. We don't want someone with sort of this paternalistic tone coming in and telling us, oh, I'm going to make things right for you. It's like, we don't like that. I mean, that's sort of a palpable perspective. And, that's kind of in part informing what we're doing, trying not to be a bad requester in that sense, trying not to be patronizing and trying to, in our scholarly approach, that's not our goal here, is to point out, oh, these people are being exploited and we need to fix them and fix the system.
Yeah.
I mean, largely what we're doing is looking at this, this network, this system or platform through a lot of different means and see what it's doing. Of course, that doesn't really allow us to sidestep the ethics of it, as Kegel pointed out, just saying, well, we're academics, so we're just looking at it, that doesn't really exculpate you.
And what's really interesting is I think all of after that conversation with Kegel, right, I think our instincts going into this are really interesting, because it's precisely those instincts that are at odds with, I think, a pretty ubiquitous Turker perspective. Like, no, we don't. So it's really weird. There's also a sense in which it's almost like it's too good to be true. That's not really what I want to say, right? That we want to impose all of these constraints on ourselves to make sure that we are, doing this right. And the subject population itself, oh no, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
So it's weird, like, I don't know. It's like,
well, there's no easy answer here, right? I mean, what Kegel's pointing out is the value of treating people with whom you're working as participants rather than subjects. And I mean, she said, you can treat research subjects as subjects. I'm not saying, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I mean, she's saying, I'm not saying that's like wrong or evil, but that's also treating them as subjects versus treating them as participants. And, she went into detail about what participation is and how it might work here and that kind of thing. And as you say, I mean, we took that to heart and made sort of moves that we thought were more respectful of people's labor, what they were doing. And yet there is still, in fact, this is a perfect segue, not predetermined, but useful segue. Like, so, our hits have, in round one have three, well, actually in both rounds, but we're only doing round one right now, have three prompts. One of them is provide a readable summary of X. And then the second prompt is, can you please rate the clarity of the instructions on a 4-point scale, that actually the entries are completely unclear, somewhat unclear, somewhat clear, and completely clear. And we intentionally didn't want a middle choice because, possibly it could aggregate there. And it also doesn't use numbers. You're not presented with a 0 to 5.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then there's a sentence asking you to explain that. And then it does the same thing with a prompt saying, how fair is this compensation for what you did? And can you please provide a sentence of explanation? And you'll notice as I'm showing you here, right, this is one response to that. It was fair for the price. However, writing out explaining our answers for the last two questions is a bit annoying.
Yeah.
So you can see, like, our thing is, we'll treat you as participants by, ensuring things like, is this fair? And, is it clear? I mean, also we want these answers, but it's also an attempt to value what people are adding to this. And, partially, this isn't prevalent, but there is a theme of, yeah, it's fair, but I don't, the last two questions are these sort of, kind of faffing about what are your feelings about this are not that important, just
right.
Stick to the first thing.
Yeah, the questions that we wrote to engage them more as participants and less as subjects will, by some of the participants, be annoying.
Yeah. I mean, it's just part of the risk. And I can see the perspective, and you talked about, like, because this platform is very much kind of dependent on a relationship between time and compensation. So I can see a valid perspective, and we knew it going in, where it's like any additional questions we ask are keeping them from doing other hits, or it's like, again, you're not getting like a wage. These are all based on reward. So the faster you can do stuff, the better, right? Yeah, so anything, even something that's like, and it's something Kegel talked about, in terms of like asking people, what do they think about this? The way this platform is structured, that comes with risk, because it's like, I don't have time to answer this. Just let me move on,
Yeah.
Anywho.
Yeah. Given how tightly structured a Turker's workday can be, that would, if half the hits they did were asked such questions,
yeah,
that would produce a discernible negative impact on their earning that day or that period.
Yeah, I mean, particularly, well, I mean, and definitely there are platform ways around this, including things like, as we've addressed before, things like bonuses, right? Where if it were structured such that you don't have to do that, but you got a bonus for doing it, that might be, I mean, there are definitely ways to massage the method, depending on what you like to see. I mean, and that said, I appreciate that feedback. As I said, it's not prevalent, but it's there, right? That it's like, some people will just handle this by giving a terse answer. It's like, it's very fair. I feel like it's very fair.
Mm-hmm.
It's, in fact, someone actually even computed it, like, for me, this works out to about $12 an hour. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense,
Yeah.
Because we were seeking at least minimum wage. Okay, so anywho, let's take a look at just some of the responses. And I did, I've deleted everything except the responses there, even though we're not retaining anything anyway. I just, so this one is the image. And you can see kind of the range I was talking about, right? Let me pull up that image. In fact, I just shared the desk. You can see. Yeah, okay. Because I think I just shared this screen. Just to pull this up, so we have some grounding here. Right, so this is the image that we're using. You know, as we talked about, sort of it suggests what's going on and has some interesting, like, you know, we discussed, would anyone point out that there's this looming figure in the background, right? So this is the image here so far is what we've got, right? He is taking care of the little boy's studies. Nice, which is one of the sort that I mentioned, kind of, you know, not pertinent, but valuable.
Yep.
And then we've got a father is helping his son with his homework at a desk next to a cardboard cutout of Garth Brooks, right?
Perfect.
I mean, it's like full gamut right there, you know? Even identified that it's Garth Brooks, bringing to bear, and this is one of the reasons why we liked that being in there, bringing to bear, there's not a right answer to this, but like, is it more readable to say, you know, while there's a figure in the background, a cardboard cutout of a man, because, right, I mean, this isn't a yes or no question. It's like, is it right to say this is Garth Brooks? Because in a sense, that limits your audience. It's a more sophisticated answer, but does that make it a better summary? Because someone could say that summary, while producing more information, is less accessible to more people. Because it asks the question, you know, well, who's Garth Brooks? If you don't know who Garth Brooks is,
yeah.
If you just said, you know, the figure of a man in a cowboy hat, is that a more readable summary?
Because it brings in the whole sort of cultural knowledge
Yes.
of readability.
Yep.
I mean, but, you know, he's an international superstar, Jeremy, so I doubt there are people who don't know who Garth Brooks is.
Someone, you know, I mean, I'm a native Oklahoman, so I'm well aware of who Garth Brooks is. But no, it's an interesting question, right? I mean, you know, is there a trade-off there between like precision and cultural savvy? But is that a less, because I imagine you know, like an SAT question would not say that. It would say, you know, the figure of a man. There's a sort of generic, accurate statement. So it's an interesting answer.
Yeah.
And then we've got, he is guiding to the little boy, right? And we can see a pattern of sort of some like mechanical things, grammatical, I should say. A teacher teaching on a boy and solve his doubt, right?
Yeah, the solving doubt is really like answering a question. I mean, I wonder if it's a translation issue there too, but yeah, doubt ends up being a kind of interesting word there.
Yeah, it's interesting that, and again, you know, these are kind of interesting because some of these we look at it and say, well, maybe these aren't native English speakers. And by intent, the net we cast is wide, right? There are parameters you can put when making a post that limit this. But, you know, part of the reason why, and this is why we, you know, why we defend our methods, although someone could say, well, you just didn't do this right. If you tweak this in mTurk, you get a different response. It's like, that's true, but that's kind of what we want to see. If you take the approach of like, you can get a better answer for your summary, it's like, that's kind of presupposing what better is. It's like, well, definitely I could constrain the experiment to get exactly what I want.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, there's a kind of falsity in that where it's like, yeah, if the experiment is, I walk in and I say, hey, don't eat the marshmallow. Hang on, and you'll get 2 marshmallows, and I'm going to watch. I'm going to make sure you don't eat that marshmallow. It's like, then yes, at the end, nobody would eat the 1 marshmallow and they get the 2, but that's a weird experiment, right? Here, yes, if I build a framework such that it ends exactly how I want, then yeah, I have a better hit, but it's a worse experiment, right?
Plus we're not interested. I mean, it's also wrong on the other, like it presumes a right answer. It also presumes that that's what we're interested in.
Yeah, right. I don't really want the summary to a degree. I do, but I don't just want the summary. I want to see what people say in response to the prompt. That's what I want.
Yeah. So there is no right answer to this. And even if there was, that's not what we're interested in.
But it does, to a degree, underscore the nature of the hit we have here, which is an academic hit versus something like a commercial hit, which would want, right, this is the sentence I'm looking for, right? Where it's like there is a more and less right answer to this because, for example, I'm training something like a machine learning visual recognition system.
Yeah.
So I need a bank of, accurate answers for this. It's sort of, different purposes in different kinds of hits. So anyway, this is the one for the image. The audio clip was the first one posted. And in doing these myself, to me, the audio clip is the hardest of these.
Yeah.
Because it's, you don't have this visual information. And
the audio quality is, as we discussed, is debated, how much of it got at that, the ways in which we could divide up or think about readability at several levels, right? The kind of cultural readability, but also, intelligibility, like literally being able to parse the voices in the audio. So I think that's why we ended up going with a not professionally recorded, right? This was just audio I ripped from the video. So
yeah, because something that certainly came out in the first product was readability as both sort of like what you would consider to be sort of bodily perception, right? Readability in terms of like, I can make out this character on a handwritten note, but also how that taps into, comprehension, right? Legibility, but also comprehensibility gets kind of elided under the aegis of readability.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this audio, if you listen to it without sort of a preconceived notion of what this is.
Last one.
Good job. Last one.
Yeah. 619. That can't be 18.
It can't be 18.
It can be.
Oh, it can
So,
be.
yeah, it is.
So that would be, yeah.
It can be the higher number. So
All right.
we're done.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's, the audio, the production is fuzzy.
Indeed.
And let me see, yeah.
And clean that up in post.
But, we intentionally didn't. And, it's not, even if you had a transcript, as Sean kind of pointed out, it's not like the meaning here would just jump at you.
Right.
But still, let's see here, audio. So we've got two people who are discussing the potential answers to a question, perhaps a tutor and a student, right?
Yeah.
I like this also, like that it has a quality, like, we tend to think of these answers as like wanting a definite answer.
Yeah.
This hedges, I kind of like this. It says perhaps a tutor and student, because we know there is an answer here, but the response is like, maybe it's this,
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's, it's a sort of non-machinic answer. We don't think of like, we think of a machinic answer would be one that is definite, even if it's false. This is what it is, even if it's a misidentification, right?
Yeah, that perhaps is interesting.
Yeah, it is. Think of like, as I'm sure you do frequently throughout the day, Hunt for Red October, right? Where it misidentifies the sound as magma, right? It's not like it says, I don't know, maybe it's magma, maybe it's a sub. It's like, no, this is magma. It's definite. It's just wrong.
Yeah. It runs home to mama.
Right. Precisely. Home to its training. A man works through a math problem with a boy. It's like, it's like, this one is like, even though this is the toughest, it's like, a lot of these are very good.
I'm surprised by how on these are.
I know. Seems a student is replying a math question to her teacher. However, she seems uncertain if the answer is correct. Of course, in this case, it's a boy. So kind of an interesting sort of, I don't want to say mistake, but an interesting read there, right?
Yep.
Two people are talking about something that has to do with the number 18. That's true, but it's maybe is this a less readable summary than, some of these others, right?
It really does though. These do. This is a nice,
I know,
unpacking of readable.
I know.
They're all right.
Yeah. And then of course we've got like good sentence.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like even these, these few that we've already got back, they're like, those are already interesting,
Yeah.
Similar thing for the video clip as well. Let's see.
I was worried we'd get very few readable out of the audio, but yeah.
It's tough to, and what's interesting is like, if you look at some of the responses, so some of the responses to, there's a prompt that asks, were the instructions clear? And some people address the media itself. In fact, I think the audio might have.
That's interesting because one could imagine, it gets me thinking about the readability of the hit itself, because one could imagine, right, that if not knowing what it is the requester's up to.
Yes, right.
That it could be like, no, we know it's bad audio. We're trying to come up with a limit case of, yeah.
Well, and some folks included the media. So like, if some people were asked this question, it's like, were the instructions clear to you? You'd say, what the meaning of that would be, do I understand what I'm being asked to do, right?
Right.
But some people incorporated like, well, the audio was fuzzy, therefore the instructions were not super clear. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like, part of the instructional content is the ambiguity of the media itself, not the language you're guiding me with, but I can't suss out that audio,
What was the next column? The same person that mentioned the media. Their next one is assuming I don't get, or
right here.
Yeah.
The explication of fairness. So assuming that they're not rejected for not being able to understand. So already sort of thinking about, am I going to get rejected because I can't suss out this fuzzy audio? Then it's fair, right? I mean, so it's a contingent,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the responses are interesting.
Yeah, the linkage between those two, right? Worried about the hit getting accepted or rejected, then attunes them into the quality of the media. I mean, you wonder the relationship between those two statements.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, even this item itself, potentially, because like, if you listen to it the first time, it wouldn't surprise me if like a few people were like, I got to listen to that again, where it's like, I got to actually listen to this a few times to get a sense of what's going on there, in a way that like that image maybe presents the case differently. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is the fact that the audio is fuzzy and therefore requires closer scrutiny may have impacts on, not only the sentences that are written up in terms of summary, but also people's kind of response to that, right?
Yeah.
The video, here's
right. I mean, it's sort of what you're getting at. I mean, that one we don't necessarily, there's not extra compensation for the audio one, even though the audio one might conceivably take more time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, intellectually, it's like, I'm leaning close and trying to just parse out terms versus looking at a picture. It's like, I mean, again, in Hunt for Red October, that was a job. A guy listened all day. It was a job. This is the video. A man helps his son with homework. A man standing next to a kid and helping him with his homework, tutoring him. This video, nice. In general, the man is helping and clarifying all the doubts, doubt that the boy has had in relation to his schoolwork. That's interesting because it's going beyond the immediate situation. I mean, the immediate situation is answering a math problem. This is a man reassuring his kid about homework,
Although what's interesting is it's actually Will reassuring me.
That's right. That's true. No, this can be the answer.
Yeah.
That is interesting. Your role in it is not that helpful.
My role is, I don't understand how fractions work. Can you please explain this to me?
A man is helping a child with a math question that they end up solving together.
I like that reading.
It's generous.
Yeah, they end up solving together. Oh, what a great father. I would love if one of these descriptions actually includes some kind of a dedicated father or.
That's true. We haven't, I mean, that one of those responses, but there isn't much about like, yeah, those sorts of, I don't know, qualitative judgments of relationship, right? No one said a tender moment between father and son, right, as their answer,
Yeah.
or something like that. I don't know. So that's the gist of what we've gotten. As I said, this is just sort of the start of the results we're going to get, but already they're neat. It's already worth the price of admission. So,
Ugh.
was that an email you got?
What's that?
Was that your email? I heard an email ding, but was it yours?
I don't think so.
Okay, it must have been me.
There's also a truck backing up nearby, so that could be it.
Okay, so that's the gist of it. So next steps for that, I've been spacing out those posts, even though they tend to get completed within, maybe 2 hours or so. It's only 5, and I was kind of interested. I was like, I didn't know if like when I posted that, they'd be immediately, it'd be like bam, 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 or if it would take a while. It's taking a couple hours, kind of depends seemingly when they're posted, although I don't have a great beat on that because I haven't posted a ton of them. But the next steps, is to finish that up with the textual one. The one I haven't posted yet is the paragraph, right? That sort of paragraph of discourse. We'll see how people pull that together. That'll do those 4 for that's instructional language that's focused on the task. This is the one that tells you, in the description, you're going to be summarizing, an image or whatever. So the next step will be, after those 4 completed, doing the other instructional language that's focused on the time, the one that says like a 2 to 3 minute survey or whatever, which interestingly, based on response times to this first one, may not be super accurate. So it'll be the responses, the average has taken longer than I anticipated.
To complete the hit?
Yes. Yep. Now, sometimes it'll be clearly like someone has like not given it their immediate attention, or like they did part of it and then did something else and then came back, just because the gap is long. But saying in the description 2 to 3 minutes, survey, that may be underselling it. Now we're not going to change it, in part because that's the language we use in the IRB. But I wonder if that also will shape. If the expectation is this should only take you 2 minutes, do you then race through it because it's like, well, this is it's only supposed to take that long, Even though it doesn't cut you off, you've got longer than that. You've got a generous buffer in terms of how long you're given to complete it.
Yeah.
Way more than anyone would take. But if the expectation is boom, 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 then maybe people treat it boom, 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 right? So, we'll see what the responses are like when that language shifts. So that's the next step, is those 4, basically replicating these 4, but with the other language. That'll give us a total of 8. Then we do those in the same pattern at the $1.50 and then the $2 compensation, which ultimately will give us 24. Okay?
Yeah.
So we get the first 4, second 4, and then we repeat first 4 and second 4 at the other compensation levels. We end up with 4 by 6, basically 24. Which is interesting because it's like, even at 1 a day, that's a month, of data collection. And that's just round 1. Then round 2, determining which of those is more readable than others or whatever. So all this is to say, right now we're in data collection for this second one. That's kind of the focus there, which means in terms of the project, our focus should probably return to revising the first product.
Yeah.
Which, this is the introduction. Whipped up why is there a gap here? Whipped up a new outline to sort of ground what we're doing in particular ways. There's new introductory matter here about, in fact, I mean, it's largely, this is all new, it's all rewritten. That's grounding this in questions of things like labor. In fact, it dovetails very well with the kind of unionization activities that are going on right now, because it in fact points to, I can see here, it's quite informative that efforts toward collective action by Amazon warehouse employees coalesced around the motto, "We are not robots." And there's a photo we're pulling from another source that is a woman, holding up, she's got, like a union badge on and holding up a sign that says, "We are not robots," which is very much an animating question for what we're doing. Are we robots? Are robots us? So, there's new introductory material there. You can see in the outline, like, I've crossed off what's been done. So it's getting to this point where I think you were talking about working in like Jim Brown.
Yes, I've got some quotes and some chunks that I think will, they make several moves that I think will address a couple of bits of feedback we got pretty efficiently.
Yeah, so I think that'll be the next step there. I can't really start revising the methods, or I don't want to start revising the methods section just yet, because I'm not quite sure what all is going to fit into the intro.
Yeah.
What's going to go. So I'd prefer to have the introduction revised before I pick up with the methods, because I have notes to myself, but some of it, like, because the issue of at what point do we sort of show our cards in terms of this is what the project as a whole is and why it has this sort of collaborative exploratory bent. The material really that like Kathleen was pointing out, to what extent is your work a mechanical Turk-esque function, right? A collaboration between humans and non-humans. At what point do we say, yes, that's what it is? Is that something that's in the intro, or is it something that's more methodological, right? Here's the orientation of this, and so here's why we're doing that. My impulse is that that's methods discussion, but we'll see. Do we tip our hand in the intro or not? So
yeah.
There's that. I might try to revise some later stuff, because like I was looking at the end if it maybe made more sense to sort of refit the sort of last sections. It may make more sense actually for what is currently our conclusion to actually come before what is currently our discussion, because the way they're kind of shaped, there's almost more extrapolation to the future in the discussion than is in the conclusion, which is largely kind of summative. So I might be able to do that without tinkering with the stuff at the beginning.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the discussion section was, that's a strange section. I mean, in general, I think with these kinds of essays, this kind of, structure, figuring out discussion versus results versus conclusion.
Yeah, and I mean, in some, and we'll wrap up here. I know you have a timeline. In some situations, right, they want a hard partition between results and discussion, because the difference there is, as is rooted in the sciences, it's the difference between results being at least quasi-objective, where it's like, these are the methods, this is the material, this is what comes out when you apply the methods to the material, right? You run the experiment, this is what happened, that's a result. And then discussion, there's that hard partition, because discussion is subjective. It's here's what that means, right? Here's how to fit that into a larger structure. So they tend to enforce a harder break between those two. We're not that far on that side of the spectrum, such there is an overlap between kind of the result, particularly because of what we're doing, the result and what the result might mean. So yeah, I mean, we can kind of trace those things out a bit. I mean, they are now. It's just sort of like re-articulating them, maybe.
Yeah.
So that's the gist of it. We can go ahead and wrap up. The data collection is going to continue apace. It's just because of its nature will take time, not because it's like labor intensive, but just because of the schedule.
Yeah.
It's going to bleed into the summer, but no big deal there. I mean, it's the machine is running. So then we can, more or less revise the first product and, get done with that.
Yeah, no. And I think the spacing you've described between the various hits, I think makes a lot of sense. So.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to accelerate that unless there's a super relevant, a reason to do so.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's the gist of it. So yeah, revising, and then I'll just keep trickling out the hits. Trickle out the hits. It's like a radio ad.
Very nice.
Yep. All right. That's it. I will see you later.
All right. Bye.
See ya.